Hello everyone, I'm Dan the Cineman and welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally going to be talking through my spoiler-free and spoiler-full thoughts on Wasteman. Wasteman, although technically a 2025 film, got its UK wide release on the 20th of February. It's directed by Cal McMau and it stars David Johnson and Tom Blythe. I tried to go and see this at an early screening with Odeon, however, that fell through. I have now joined Cineworld Unlimited, and I had my first Unlimited screening tonight on the 23rd of Feb, Monday. I went with my dad and we watched this film. It's a relatively short film. The runtime is 90 minutes exactly. It's Cal McMau's directorial debut, I believe, and it's about life on the inside. It's about prison culture and the main character, David Johnson's Taylor, seeking to sort of navigate prison life with a new, very active cellmate and the rival sort of gangs, and just the internal prison politics, as well as potentially looking to life on the outside eventually. Yeah, it's my first Cineworld Unlimited screening, definitely the first of many. I've already booked two further screenings. One is Sentimental Value, which I'll be going to see on the 8th of March, and then The Secret Agent, which I'll be going to see on the 11th of March. After seeing those two, I'll just need to watch Frankenstein, and then I've seen all the Best Picture nominees, and I think I'm going to do a Best Picture nominee ranking. But before then, let's dive into my spoiler-free and spoiler-full thoughts on Wasteman. Just my usual disclaimer quickly, I will use images throughout this video. Where possible, I use images that are in the public domain and so require no credit to be given. However, where this is not possible, credit will be given where credit is due in the bottom corner. Okay, Wasteman. Yeah, I've just got out of my screening for this. I'm recording this the same night after I got home from the screening. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I've been wanting to watch it for a while. My sister Sophie actually worked on graphics for the trailer. I'll link her letterbox and her Instagram, her work Instagram in the description. But yeah, she works for a company that does graphics and sort of font overlays for films. She's mainly worked on film trailers, I believe, so far, some series trailers as well. And yeah, the marketing for this film is great. Even if I hadn't, had a relative that worked on the trailers, I feel like the font and the graphics were quite striking. So I think I would have seen this anyway. But yeah, finally got the opportunity to watch this with my dad, and yeah, we both really enjoyed it. Definitely a pleasant surprise. I feel like with films that have such short run times, I'm always sort of expecting, I'm not exactly sure, but 90 minutes is such a short runtime, and this film, this director used every single minute of that to great effect here. Here's my letterbox review. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. So for me, that's 4.25. I use the heart as a 0.25 extra. Sometimes the jump between 4 and 4.5 feels a bit too big, but this didn't feel like a 4-star film. It deserved more than that. So yeah, 4.25. And I said, fresh, but still ridiculously tense take on life inside that does a whole lot with little runtime. Second David Johnson watch, first Tom Blythe, can't wait to see more of both. D with the switch in his cell, maybe prison ain't so bad after all. To sort of set the scene of the film without going into specific details too much, we follow David Johnson's Taylor, who eventually has a new cellmate in D, and it's about their sort of journey, where the sort of prison life takes them, and we get a bit more personal into Taylor's life with his son and his family. And yeah, the film really relies on these two bouncing off each other, and they do so very, very well. Like I said on my letterbox review, I've seen David Johnson once before, and that was in Alien Romulus, and he played an android there fantastically well. Different role here, sort of similar in some aspects, downplayed, sort of introverted, but different at the same time. Obviously, this time, spoiler alert, he's not an android. But yeah, so I was familiar with his game. I really wanted to go and see him last year in the Long Walk, but I didn't get round to it. But yeah, Tom Blythe, surprise for me. I'm unfamiliar with his game. To quote Shaquille O'Neal, I'm unfamiliar with Tom Blythe's game, but he was really good here. Two different figures. Like I said, they bounce off each other very well. Tom Blythe is a menacing, sort of hard man. Um, Taylor's a little bit more nuanced. We see multiple sides to him. Maybe Tom Blythe's a little one-dimensional, but yeah, terrifying figure. A nice directorial decision from Cal McMau was to start the film and then intersperse the film and then end the film with videos taken from the cellmates' phones. I thought this worked really well. It sort of separates you from the fact that you're watching a film and almost throws you into what's actually happening. It's sort of that first person view. It's directly from a cellmate to what you're seeing. That sort of almost broke the fourth wall without actually breaking the fourth wall. And then, yeah, to bookend it at the end with another video from a cellmate's phone, I thought worked really well. Wasteman felt, like a fresh and original sort of take on prison life. I felt like I hadn't seen anything like it before, despite, seeing lots of movie and television scenes, set in prison. It had the violence that you'd expect, but it didn't feel out of place or, in there just for the sort of shock element. It really felt like violence was used to sort of hit home the horrors of prison life. And it wasn't used excessively either, too much, and it would sort of wear down the impact. But when violence was used, it was normally a big moment of the film, and there was that sort of payoff. It felt like it actually was a big moment because violence was actually not used too much. At the same time, this was ridiculously tense in parts. Obviously, I won't go into specifics yet, but yeah, majority of the film, you just felt on edge. You felt like something was about to kick off, and yeah, really well done. Edge of the seat stuff at parts here. It was quite self-contained. I mean, maybe due to the nature of the subject matter, life in prison probably can't really have, that wide narrative scope. It was quite narrow here. And on the positive side, I felt like it fully explored, all the sort of plot lines and themes that it was going for. But it was able to do that because of its short runtime and obviously, like I said, the narrow plot narrative. The cinematography was good. I did think there was potential here for some killer shots. I mean, obviously, I'm not a cinematographer. I'm not trying to tell these people what to do. But there wasn't really a time where I thought, like, wow, that's a beautiful shot, if you know what I mean. Whereas with the subject matter, with the setting, I do feel like there was potential there. Maybe that's a bit of a missed trick, but it's still, it looked fine. It looked good. It didn't look particularly amazing. The writing was very good. Obviously I've not been inside a prison, but it felt very realistic. There wasn't really a time where I thought, people don't actually speak like that, or he wouldn't actually say that, like I was in Avatar 2 and 3, where they just kept saying bro all the time. There was nothing like that here. And there was potential to, I think, go a bit exaggerated with the gangster talk or what have you. But yeah, this felt very realistic in the dialogue. The pacing was spot on. Like I said, it's tough to do that with such a short runtime, get the pacing of the plot accurate in terms of, character motivations and payoffs and emotional moments. This all felt good. It all felt earned. There was never a sort of time where I thought they'd rushed a bit, because of the shorter runtime. Like I said, it used every minute to very good use here. I'm looking forward to getting into specifics in a minute, but for now, to wrap up my spoiler-free thoughts on Wasteman, I thought it was a great film, solid directorial debut from Cal McMau. Lots to enjoy here, lots to admire from him. Yeah, David Johnson, fantastic. Tom Blythe, great acting as well. That duo, their chemistry and their sort of how they riffed off each other was fantastic here, added to the tension as well as, just the overall quality of the film. Really enjoyed this. It's still got plenty of time in its release window, so I would recommend going to give this a watch. Like I said, due to the intense nature, it would be good to see this on a big screen with, the big sound systems. Give this a watch. I'd definitely recommend. Okay, my spoiler full thoughts on Wasteman, getting into some specifics. I enjoyed the entire arc of David Johnson's character, Taylor. We get the emotional depth with the attachment to his son on the outside, and it's the sort of, like I mentioned before, that motivation for him to get involved with Dee is because he sees that he can do nice things for him. And then that's sort of flipped on its head and used against him when Dee turns really malicious against those rival sellers. The film really banks on that relationship between the two. It's almost Taylor's vulnerability. Obviously, he's a drug addict, and then it's Dee's sort of malicious, sort of infectious nastiness. And but at the same time, he shows what he can do for Taylor. And, at the start, they sort of have that positive relationship, nothing's really going wrong. And then shit hits the fan, and their relationship, turns sour, turns sort of violent in both the physical and mental way. Speaking of violence, like I said earlier, I do feel like it's used to almost a perfect level here. Not too much where, every violent scene feels like a bit repeated, but also enough to make it feel, like impactful. And you've got that opening scene on that video phone aspect ratio that I alluded to earlier, and how impactful I thought that was. You've got the opening scene of that act of violence that involves Taylor's character. It serves as both an introduction to that character and also, the nature of the film. This is a prison film. It's going to be nasty. One of the most impactful violent scenes is when those rival sellers attack Dee. It's like I said, when things get violent, you think, okay, this is really important. This is a really key moment of the film. And this was possibly the most key moment. It's where Dee and Taylor's relationship switches from that positive aspect, like I said, to the malicious and sort of tumultuous one. And it's where the rival sellers attack Dee, and they video it, and they make Taylor just stands there, and then they make Taylor actually hit Dee. The rest of the film, you're thinking, oh God, when is Dee gonna see this video? And eventually he sees it after he's told Taylor to get the knife for him. And then obviously when Taylor comes back, Dee flips it and says he needs to use the knife for him rather than Dee using it himself. And then he brings in the whole aspect of Taylor's son. It was just, all tied in really nicely. Like I said before, maybe a little bit too nicely. Maybe it was sort of a bit too narrow of a scope, but the subject matter, I'm not really sure what else, I'm expecting from a prison film. The whole section of the film after Taylor gets the knife is so, so good and so unbelievably tense. The way it's filmed, the use of the music, the acting, you're really, really on the edge of your seat, through Taylor's sweating and his acting weird. You're almost sweating and wanting to act weird. The film does a really good job of constantly reminding you, even in this tense section, how close Taylor is to getting out. He's literally one day away from leaving prison for good, and Dee makes him go and kill these two people. For Dee, the stakes aren't just life or death. He really wants to get out so he can see his son. It's that emotional level as well as, just what we're actually seeing happen on the screen. But when he cuts those guys' hair, you're just thinking, when is he going to do it? How is he going to do it? And then that reveal that, he made Dee OD was just fantastic. So, so well executed. As well as the actual twist that obviously Dee had been tricked, it was that we'd been tricked, because the whole time we're watching Taylor sweat and act weird, we think it's because he's sort of coming to grips with this horrible thing that he has to do in order to protect his son and possibly get out to see him. But he's actually sweating and acting weird because of the withdrawals from obviously going clean and saving his stash to make Dee overdose. This is obviously where the film ramps up and obviously where it really shined for me. I was sort of wondering, when is the tension going to start? When is when are the stakes going to raise almost, and they did here to a fantastic level, and yeah, pulled off really well. We're tricked, D is obviously tricked. That fight in the cell between those two felt again like the stakes were so high because of how close we know Taylor was to getting out. It was that reinforcement through several characters. I think the police officer says it. The police officer says it to him. His fellow cellmates say it to him. It was just sort of reinforced at every turn, and yeah, just fantastic. Whilst I understand making him, seem more human when we know that Taylor, or we thought we knew that Taylor was going to kill him, the rival seller with the mohawk whose hair Taylor mainly cuts, him suddenly becoming, one of the good guys felt a little bit forced. Like we're meant to see him suddenly as this nice person who we don't want to die. But for the majority of the film beforehand, we've seen him, be a bad guy, and we've sort of rooted against him. Like I said, I understand it adds to the sort of magnitude of the situation because he tells Taylor that he's got a kid, and at that point we think that Taylor's about to kill him, so it's sort of obviously playing on his mind. But yeah, and then obviously he says to Taylor to like take care on the outside. This just felt a little bit out of place, really. It didn't really feel like he deserved that moment of almost redemption. And yeah, I enjoyed the bookend with the film ending with a video from that cellmate's phone. I was tense even at the last frame. I was thinking, is someone going to attack Taylor before he gets out? But no, yeah, great ending. To wrap up my spoiler full thoughts on Cal McMau's 2025 production, but 2026 release, I think is right in saying, Wasteman. Yeah, I thought this was a really solid watch, very impressive directorial debut. Excellently built and then maintained the tension whilst, throwing in the emotional ties to make us really sort of root for David Johnson's Taylor, and that the stakes are there. You feel invested, especially for the last bit, and yeah, the rest of the film's great as well. Like I said, maybe could have been shot a little bit, nicer, and yeah, maybe with a little bit more of a runtime, they could have explored some further themes. But does a lot in 90 minutes, and yeah, it always impresses me when a film manages to do that. Wasteman is having quite a limited theatrical run, I feel like. When I've looked, it's already, we're on Wednesday, the 25th of Feb when I'm finishing this recording, and it's already getting quite, limited screenings at weird times. But do try and give this a watch if you can sort of fit yourself into a weird timing screening. I definitely recommend it. Thanks for listening. Really hope you enjoyed. I've been Dan the Cineman, and I'll see you at the movies.